Part 2, what's a virus? Yeah. And here we come to our first Easter egg. Oh my gosh, what's an Easter egg? It's like those things in video games that they put there, and if you find them, you say, oh, that's neat. Yeah. Only in this case, it gets you points. So, today's Easter egg, and they won't be in every lecture, they'll be here and there, just keep you interested, is look at this sequence at the top. Isn't that neat? If you can tell me the accession code, so there's a genetic accession code for this exact sequence, which will also tell me what it is. I want to know what species is it and what is the accession number. Yeah. You would find these things on GenBank, and you would have to do something called blasting probably to be able to find this. But the first 5 to get me an answer that's correct will get some extra credit points. So there you go. Yeah, get on it. And it's okay. For everybody else, let's go. So these are viroids, and I'm not going to say which one because you're going to tell me that. But a viroid is literally just a circle of single-stranded RNA. Looking at this, you can tell it's RNA because, look, see all those little U's right there? Yeah, U's we find in RNA, and T is the nucleotide we find in DNA, so that's fine. And this is a little circle of RNA that encodes no proteins whatsoever, but it will take a normal tomato and it will turn it into a horrible dying tomato that doesn't really produce any nice little fruits and just looks sickly and bad. Yeah. So it's almost infectious information. And we don't classify viroids as viruses in the strict sense, but we classify them as if they were viruses. So we wink and nod at them and say, yeah, sure. All right, you're a virus today. Yeah. Sure, kid. So yeah, it's a viroid, and they're pretty weird. Yeah. But yeah, it's just that information that is enough to destroy a plant. There are viroids of humans. There are all kinds of crazy viroids in the world, and they are weird. Very, very weird. All right. Here's one of the other things that we talked about. So these are the things called polydnaviruses, and I think this one is called a brachovirus, if I remember right. And so this is their life cycle. So I said these are going to be embedded in the wasp genome, and I think they're most common in wasps. These guys actually, we think, come from 2 separate kinds of virus that embedded themselves into the genome. Now, these viruses have a little sequence, which they're showing as a little triangle here, which is a repeated sequence. And they also encode an enzyme, and I think it's the little orange block that's meant to be the enzyme, that's called an integrase. And so what an integrase does is it can cut DNA and it can join DNA. It's like one of those chemical reactions, you know, where it goes in this direction and in this direction. Yeah, you've seen those reaction diagrams. If an enzyme can do one thing, it can do the other thing, and it probably depends on what it's holding on to. If it's holding on to 2 pieces, it can join them. If it's holding on to 1 piece, it can break it. Something like that. Yeah, it's just a question of equilibrium. Where's the equilibrium under the current conditions? So these things are copied as part of the host genome because they're literally part of the host genome. Then, in certain specialized cells, that are going to go along and with the, I think the egg, I think they come from the mother, maybe it's the father, I don't remember. But they are going to get transmitted, and they'll be transmitted as little circles of DNA. So, okay, so they've got an enzyme that's able to cut them out and join them back together as little circles that chopped out of that genome. And they actually get packaged up in some proteins that we think might come from another kind of virus from long ago that got embedded in this genome and then just got forgotten and kind of genetically broken over time. But anyway, the structural pieces, virion-making pieces from this one, come together with the genome-embedded DNA from this one, and you end up packaging up these little circles, and you have multiple little strands that get passaged along together. And yeah, when the wasp is laying its eggs in there, she is going to deposit some virus in addition to the eggs. And the virus will grow in the caterpillar cells. It'll grow in the developing eggs. And the little wasp pupae will then be infected with the virus. It'll embed itself back into their genomes. And then the circle is going to repeat itself. As far as we can tell, it's not really of any benefit to the wasp, although it is possible that in some cases, like there are viruses transmitted by wasps that will actually help subdue the prey that they're trying to infect and make it easier for the little wasp babies to just wreak havoc and burst out of its body. Yeah, like some kind of horror movie. So, yeah, there's probably more to learn about these. There's definitely more to learn about these. But they're kind of neat. Yeah. Okay, now on to the big picture stuff. Viruses are part of you. So we come with lots of viruses already loaded in our genome. And they are a mix. There are complete viruses, there are partial viruses, and for example, here's one thing called a human endogenous retrovirus. So a retrovirus is a virus like HIV. And so these are endogenous in that they're born with you. This is one particular type called type K, and we'll learn what the heck that means later. But these are all embedded HERV type Ks in the human genome. And they're all pretty much complete, and they all have a couple mutations, and we'll learn how they got there. That's a cool story. So they don't actually work as viruses, but we are carrying their genetic material. And occasionally, some parts of these viruses actually do get made. And occasionally, they may be able to move around in our genome or just briefly come back and then go away again. It's some weird stuff down there, but yeah, you came preloaded with viruses. That's part of your operating system, like it or not. Yeah. Which brings us to the question, and we'll deal with this in class, but should we classify ourselves as viruses? If we classify polydnaviruses, the ones from wasps, as viruses, and they're just chunks of the genome that happen to sort of infect and then get transmitted. They don't get transmitted without this weird infectious process that doesn't serve a whole lot of purpose anymore, and it's probably like a vestige from something that used to be important. We have a lot of copies of these. So literally 9% of your DNA genome is copies of fairly complete HIV-like viruses, compared to only 1.5%, which is human genes that do things like make our heart and muscles and keep us alive and let us talk about things, like viruses. So we're literally 6 times as much virus as human. And it's right there in our DNA, and we spread it to our children by having children because it's in our DNA, so it's in their DNA. And there's kind of no way to get them out. And then there's all these other things that are like viruses, but a little bit more broken and ancient. And so together, those things make up pretty close to half of your DNA. It's hard to classify a person as anything but a virus if you look at it from a genetic standpoint. The reason we generally don't classify humans as viruses is that we make the rules and we don't want to. That's number one. I guess we'd have to classify ourselves as a whole bunch of different viruses, and we like to classify each virus separately. So we've got so many viruses inside of us that we're kind of hard to put into a box. So is that a win for humanity? I don't know. Just look at the cute virus up there and think whatever you want. Yeah. Okay. There are things in the world that are transmissible, that cause disease. So they're transmitted from person to person to person, or animal to person, or animal to animal. Cause horrible, like, brain-wasting diseases. One of these would be the thing called mad cow disease or prion disease, or this chronic wasting disease of white-tailed deer, which is running around out there. And these are not caused by a virus. They are caused by a protein, and the weird next level thing here is that the protein is already in the brains of you, me, and all the healthy animals in the world. When the same protein comes in, but it's folded into a different shape. That one bumps into the proteins we already have, and almost as if by magic, but actually by structural biology, it's going to convert the form from the normal form that doesn't kill you to this form that does kill you. And so those are prions, protein-only infectious agents. They are transmissible. They are highly weird. They are not classified even as pretend viruses because they are just proteins, and the protein's already inside you. It's just that your protein has not yet found its way into this shape. And this shape is one that will convert other proteins like a catalyst into the same shape. Yeah. But there are variants of these. There are transmission barriers. It's really cool stuff. We'll cover that in probably the last week of class, just to give you something to look forward to. Something weird. Okay, last slide from this section. So viruses, sensu stricto, viruses as strictly defined are going to encode proteins, at least one, probably two in most cases, but there are exceptions. But they can encode these in a lot of different ways. So you can start out as DNA, single-stranded or double-stranded. You can start out as RNA, single-stranded or double-stranded. If you start out as RNA, why not? We could have you start out as RNA that can be read just like a messenger RNA, so all the bases are correct, like you have AUG and you want methionine to go in, if you know your genetic code. Or you can have viruses that are negative sense. So you wouldn't have AUG, you would have the opposite of G, which is C, and the opposite of U, which is A, and the opposite of A, which is U. So you would have CAU, and going backwards, and you would have the opposite, the reverse complement of the genes you need. And that seems like an insane way to do business, and I would agree with you. I like these viruses, positive sense viruses. They're positive, yeah. Who doesn't like positive things? Yeah. Or you could just be totally indecisive and carry both strands around with you, positive and negative. We call those double-stranded RNA viruses. Anyway, all these things are trying to, so they are going to have some way to replicate. And they'll usually do it themselves, but occasionally the cell is going to have a big role in it. Other times the cell will have a small role, or the cell will be treated like a pantry and the virus will just raid it for supplies and goodies. Yeah. So we're going to replicate, and all the DNA viruses are going to be turned into double-stranded DNA. There are also some RNA viruses that are going to be turned into DNA. All the RNA viruses will be turned into double-stranded RNA. And then the virus will have some way, either virus or host, to make messenger RNA from that. And the hard-working viruses, they're going to make that messenger RNA themselves. The lazy viruses, they're going to get the cell to make the messenger RNA for them. They'll just encode the right signals. Both of these things work. Both of them are equally deadly and horrible. It's not really a contest with viruses. Essentially, anything that can work is out there, does work, and is doing just fine. Yeah, there are no endangered species lists for viruses. Or rather, we always hope that a virus will get onto that list, but they seldom do, unless we put them there. Anyway, the point of messenger RNA is to make that protein, and so there's always a coding strategy, but from many different starting points. And then you get just weirdo viruses like hepatitis B, absolute freak. Starts out as double-stranded DNA, flips itself to single-stranded RNA, because why not? And then it doesn't use the RNA to make, messenger, nothing like that. It's going to flip itself back to double-stranded DNA, outthinking you there, from which point we're then going to make messenger RNA. It's going to go make proteins, So it's absolutely bizarre, but it works. And hepatitis B is horrible and deadly. And if you work with blood products, they'll offer you a vaccine for it. And it's a real good vaccine to take. Because if you get the virus and you don't have the vaccine, you die horribly pretty soon. Yeah. So there's not a lot there's actually nothing you can do about it. At that point. So there you go. I'm not advocating vaccines. I think that's probably against the law, but I'm just saying, smart money. All right, that's enough for this section. Then we'll go on with a couple more examples of just stuff about viruses, just general stuff about viruses that you need in your brain. All right, thanks.